How much has this program cost as far, what was the cost of the literacy training just by itself?
The literacy training, the overarching literacy program, has cost about $88 million. That includes the facilities, the classrooms and such. But the cost per individual is what's really significant. We now have over 91,000 have graduated from some literacy classes, and we know we can teach literacy for about $33 a person. So it's a rather dramatic, return on the investment. For $33, we can take somebody who cannot read, cannot write, cannot add, and teach them how to do the basic skills that I think are necessary to be a police or to be a soldier.
Now, how important, now that you're talking about, is literacy to have an effective and professional Afghan force?
Well, it's absolutely essential. As you mentioned, some of this was at the urging of Ambassador Holbrooke before General Caldwell and I went to Afghanistan. He told us literacy was a huge program. It was a game changer. And when we got there, we realized he was indeed right. It's so important. If a police officer can't write his name or he can't write a report, then he's really limited to do just certain things, very limited skills. If a soldier can't even look at the serial number on his weapon, then he can't even account for his weapon. He has trouble understanding basic instructions. It's not because he's stupid or because he's has a problem. It's because he hasn't had the opportunity to learn to read and write. And we find everybody wants to learn to read and write. I'll tell you another issue that I think is absolutely essential is from a corruption standpoint. If you don't know how to count, then you don't know how much things cost. You have no idea how much things cost. You don't know how much money you have in your hand, and so you're dependent on somebody else. Somebody else has to tell you how much it costs, how much money you have, how much to give. Whenever you teach someone how to read, write, and also how to count, or you teach the numeracy skills, what that does, that gives them the control. They now can control how much they're spending, control how much they have, and that really has a big impact on corruption.
And what is the current literacy level among Afghan forces recruits, including the Afghan police and the Afghan National Army?
Well, overall, the literacy rate in Afghanistan is about 28%. That's what the Ministry of Education says. So 28% for the entire population. We find, though, for the new recruits coming in the Army and the police, our literacy rate is about 14%, about half of that. There's a good reason for that. That's because since 1979, many of the schools closed, and they didn't open again until about 2005. So what we are getting is the lost generation that didn't have the opportunity to go to schools because they were closed and because they hadn't opened yet. So 14% is what we have for the incoming recruits and incoming Army. However, what we've found is that because of these literacy classes we've had, because of the numbers that we've been able to take through the classes, we're now about 30% literate. So we're actually higher than the average. We know also as we continue this program and continue to do the literacy classes for the soldiers and policemen as they come in, and also as in their force, we know we'll have over 50% literacy by the end of this year or by January 2012.
Wow. And what does it take to bring an Afghan recruit to a first grade, third grade level as far as time is concerned?
Right. Well,
can you talk about that?
We could teach a class, to teach first grade skills, you can teach a class in 64 hours. That's 64 contact hours. That's 64 hard, tough contact hours. But in 64 hours, you could teach someone to read and write at the first grade level. And we can do that in the 8-week courses that we have, the 6 to 8 week courses for basic training in the Army and the police. And we've embedded that throughout the entire course. And then for another about 250 hours, we can get them to the third grade level. So it's a little over 300 hours to get everybody from first, second, and third grade if they progress through. And we have about a 88-90% pass rate when they've completed these courses.
Okay, and can you talk about what's an acceptable and adequate literacy level? I know that you talked about that the goal is to bring them to a first grade level and then build on that. Can you talk about that goal, elaborate a little more on that?
Well, I think what's acceptable is functional literacy, which is third grade. I think third grade, that's our goal. We think it's a realistic goal. We know it will take time, but we think that's what it takes to be a professional Army and police, at least that third grade level. We also know that once you get to the third grade level, then you continue to advance. That once you get that basic skill, that building block, that it's a lot easier to continue to have further literacy classes and further educational opportunities. So our intent is to have educational opportunities throughout the whole life cycle or career of the Army and the police.
So the way I understand this, a third grade level is an adequate level for a professional Afghan force?
Yes, third grade is what we call the functional literacy, and we think that's a sufficient level that we can get the force to.
And when do you expect that the Afghan forces will reach that functional literacy level?
Well, that's hard to say. We know that we're going to get to 50% with some level of literacy by January 2012. If we continue, we're working towards the 2014 date, which is the transition date. So by the end of 2014, when Afghanistan will have lead security responsibility, that's the goal that we have, to get everybody that we can up to the 3rd grade level. We'll just have to continue to grow the program, continue to advance, and continue to have this program not just in basic training, not just in the educational foundational classes, but the entire force. But by the end of 2014, we should have that functional literacy.